Commander Alan West looked out the viewport of the United Earth Patrol ship Dauntless. The stars glittered against the blackness of space. The Kuiper Belt stretched before them, a region of ice and rock at the edge of humanity's solar system. It was supposed to be a routine mission. Monitor the outer boundary, check the automated warning beacons, then return to Earth. "Anything unusual on scanners, Lieutenant?" Alan asked, his voice breaking the silence on the bridge. "Lieutenant Diane," Powell shook her head. "Nothing, Commander, just the usual ice chunks and—" She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening at her console. "Sir, I'm picking up something big." Alan moved quickly to her station. The scanner showed an object emerging from what appeared to be a tear in space itself. It wasn't using conventional propulsion. "Full alert," Alan ordered. "Notify Earth." "Command immediately." The ship's lights dimmed as emergency power rerouted to shields and weapons systems. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, but Alan could see the tension in their movements. Humanity had been spacefaring for nearly a century, but they had never encountered another intelligent species. Until now. The object grew larger on their view screen. It was massive, at least 20 times the size of the Dauntless. Its hull was a deep purple-black, covered with what looked like crystalline structures. "Sir, they're hailing us," Communications Officer Ryan Jones said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Unknown language, but the computer is attempting to translate." Alan straightened his uniform. "Put it through." The view screen flickered and Alan found himself looking at a being unlike anything from Earth. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on a face that resembled polished stone. Its skin was a mottled gray-purple with ridges where a human would have cheekbones. The translation software struggled for a moment before producing a voice, flat and mechanical, but understandable. "Primitive vessel, you are addressed by High Commander Zextral of the Vraxian Dominion. Your solar system is now under our protection and authority. Transmit your surrender protocols immediately." Alan felt a chill run down his spine, but his expression remained neutral. 7 years in Earth's defense fleet had trained him not to show fear. "This is Commander Alan West of the United Earth vessel, Dauntless. We do not recognize your authority over our system. We are a sovereign species." The alien's upper eyes narrowed, slightly. "Curious. Your response is outside predicted parameters. Your technology indicates a Level 3 civilization. All previously encountered Level 3 species have immediately recognized the pointlessness of resistance." Alan stood his ground. "We are not other species. We are human." Human. The alien seemed to taste the word. "Your designation is irrelevant. The Vraxian Dominion has conquered 17 solar systems. We have subjugated dozens of sentient races. Resistance is futile and illogical." Behind Alan, the bridge crew continued preparations. Lieutenant Powell was quietly coordinating with Tactical. They had trained for first contact scenarios, but not one where the aliens immediately demanded surrender. "We wish no conflict," Alan said carefully, "but we will not surrender our home." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species is young and primitive. We have been conquering the stars for millennia. Your defiance is amusing." The transmission cut off abruptly. Seconds later, the Dauntless rocked as energy weapons struck their shields. "Return fire," Alan ordered, bracing himself against his command chair. "Evasive pattern Delta." The Dauntless was smaller but more maneuverable. It darted between asteroids as the massive alien ship fired again and again. Each hit made the lights flicker. "Shields at 60%, Lieutenant Powell reported. Our weapons are having minimal effect on their hull." Alan's mind raced. The Vraxian ship was powerful, but slow to turn. "Get us behind that large asteroid," he ordered. "We need a moment to think." As they took shelter, Alan addressed the crew. "They expect us to follow conventional tactics. They expect us to surrender when outgunned. We won't do either." "Sir," Weapons Officer Greg Mason spoke up, "those crystal structures on their hull, they're concentrating energy before firing. If we could target just those," Alan nodded, "and use the asteroid field to our advantage." "Good thinking, Mason." He turned to the helm. Officer Chen, I need you to fly like you've never flown before. Yes, sir, she replied, hands already moving across the controls. The plan was risky. The Dauntless would dart out from cover, fire precisely at the crystal structures, then use the asteroid field for cover again before the larger ship could bring its main weapons to bear. We hit and run, Alan told them. Like our ancestors hunting larger prey on the savannah, we persist until we win. The first attack caught the Vraxians by surprise. The Dauntless emerged from behind an asteroid, fired a concentrated burst at one of the crystal structures, and vanished back into the field before the alien ship could respond. The crystal shattered, and a section of the Vraxian ship went dark. It worked, Lieutenant Powell exclaimed. That section of their weapon system is offline. They repeated the tactic again and again. Each time the Dauntless darted out, struck precisely, and disappeared before the larger ship could lock on. After the sixth attack, 2 more Vraxian ships appeared through tiers in space. They've called for reinforcements, Alan said grimly. We're outmatched 3-1 now. But the Vraxians were clearly puzzled by the human tactics. They had never encountered a species that refused to engage in a direct confrontation when outgunned. The 3 ships attempted to trap the Dauntless between them. They're trying to box us in, Alan observed. Perfect. He smiled tightly. Set collision course for the space between those 2 ships. Maximum speed. Sir? Officer Chen looked shocked. That's suicide. They think like conquerors, Alan explained. They expect us to value our lives above victory. They won't expect this. The Dauntless accelerated directly between 2 of the Vraxian ships. At the last possible second, Alan gave the order. Release all mines. Then emergency reverse thrusters. The small ship dropped its entire complement of nuclear mines and performed a maneuver that strained both the ship and its crew. The G-forces pushed everyone to their limits, but they held. The mines detonated in a chain reaction just as the Dauntless escaped the blast radius. The explosion caught both Vraxian ships, crippling them. The third ship, the original one, retreated hastily. In the aftermath, as the Dauntless limped back toward Earth, they received another transmission from High Commander Zex Troll. Your tactics were unexpected, the alien admitted. No species has ever destroyed Vraxian warships in a first encounter. The Dominion will reconsider its approach to your system. After the transmission ended, the bridge was silent for a long moment. They'll be back, Lieutenant Powell said finally. Alan nodded. Yes. But next time we'll be ready. And they'll know that humans don't surrender easily. Word of the encounter spread quickly throughout the galaxy. The species that had conquered 17 solar systems had been driven back by a small patrol ship from a planet that had only recently achieved interstellar travel. The galactic community took notice. Humanity had announced its presence not with diplomacy or trade, but by becoming the first species to successfully resist the Vraxian dominion. The message was clear. Humans might be new to the stars, but they were unlike any species the galaxy had encountered before. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and most terrifyingly of all, they were willing to risk everything to remain free. The news of the Dauntless's victory against the Vraxian ship spread quickly across Earth. Commander Alan West and his crew returned as heroes. But for Dr. Susan Miller, the real work was just beginning. Susan worked in the xenobiology department, aboard the Earthship Defiance. At 43, she had spent her entire career studying theoretical alien life. Now she finally had real data to analyze. Look at these readings from the Vraxian ship, Susan said to her assistant Kevin Barnes. Their biology is completely different from ours. They evolved in an environment with very little competition. Kevin leaned over her shoulder. What does that mean for us? It means they don't understand what they're dealing with, Susan replied. Humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. Predators, disease, even the weather. We had to become adaptable to survive. 3 weeks after the first contact, representatives from the Galactic Council arrived in Earth's orbit. Their massive ship dwarfed anything humans had built. This time, however, they came not to conquer but to invite, Admiral Frank Carter, head of Earth's Defense Fleet, selected Susan to join the diplomatic team. Her understanding of alien biology made her the perfect choice to help humans navigate this new frontier. The council chamber was enormous. Representatives from 87 spacefaring civilizations gathered in tiered seating around a central speaking platform. Humans were the newest and least advanced species present. The Vraxians have dominated this region of space for centuries, Admiral Carter whispered to Susan as they took their seats. You've got to help us understand why they retreated. A tall, thin alien with iridescent skin approached them. I am Zorvex of the Thelicans, chief scientist of the council, it said through a translation device. Your victory against the Vraxian fleet is unexpected. I wish to understand how. Susan stood to address the scientist. It's simple adaptation. Humans evolved differently than most species represented here. The council chamber grew quiet as Susan was invited to the central platform. Images of human physiology appeared on large screens around the room. Humans are persistence predators, Susan explained. Our ancestors chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We can't run as fast as many animals, but we can run longer. Zorvex tilted its head. This is unusual but not unique. The Dravek also evolved as pursuit predators. The difference, Susan continued, is that humans also spent much of our evolutionary history as prey. We had to become adaptable, resourceful, and able to function under extreme stress. She displayed images of human adrenal glands and explained how adrenaline worked. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You mean to say, one of them asked, that humans become more effective in combat when they are injured or threatened? Exactly, Susan replied. Our bodies release chemicals that temporarily block pain, increase strength, and enhance reaction time when we're in danger. It's called the fight or flight response. But humans have a third option. Many species don't. We can fight while fleeing. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The concept seemed to disturb many of the representatives. Most concerning, Susan continued, is that human military tactics evolved from this duality. We know we aren't the strongest, but we've learned to use that to our advantage. We create plans assuming we're outmatched. Admiral Carter stood up. The Vraxians expected us to behave like other species they've conquered, logically assessing their superior strength and surrendering. They didn't expect us to fight creatively, using our environment and taking risks they considered irrational. Zorvex approached a console and displayed data from the battle. Your tactics were indeed unusual. The commander of your vessel deliberately flew between two Vraxian warships, a maneuver with only a 12.7% survival probability. For humans, Susan explained, a small chance of victory is better than certain defeat. We've built our entire civilization on beating the odds. The representatives from the council studied the humans with new interest. Some seemed fascinated, others disturbed. There is another factor, Susan added. Human pain tolerance. She displayed medical data comparing human pain responses to those of other species. Our studies show that humans can continue functioning despite injuries that would incapacitate most other sentient species. We have cases of soldiers continuing to fight with multiple fractures, severe blood loss, even missing limbs. The council. Chamber fell completely silent. The concept seemed to horrify many of the representatives. An older alien with mottled green skin stood up. I am Elder Krovak of the Peltari Confederacy. We have observed your species from afar for some time. Your historical records confirm what Dr. Miller suggests. Human warfare evolved not away from violence but alongside it. You have spent thousands of years developing more efficient ways to kill each other. Admiral Carter nodded. We don't deny our violent past, but we've also learned from it. The same adaptability that makes us dangerous also allows us to change, to grow beyond our instincts. After the session ended, Zorvex approached Susan privately. I have classified humans as evolutionary anomalies in my report to the council, the alien scientist said. You are the only known species whose combat effectiveness increases under stress rather than deteriorates. Is that good or bad for us? Susan asked. It means, Zorvex replied, that many species will seek Earth as an ally. Others will fear you as a potential threat. The Vraxians retreated because they recognized something their experience had not prepared them for, a species that becomes more dangerous when cornered. As they returned to their ship, Admiral Carter looked troubled. So what you're saying is that the very thing that makes us dangerous, our evolutionary history, is also what makes us valuable to the Council? Susan nodded. We're unique. Most species out there evolved either as apex predators with no natural enemies, or as cooperative species that avoided conflict entirely. They never had to develop our adaptability. And that's why we're feared, Carter said quietly. Yes, Susan agreed. But it's also why we're needed. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Species like the Vraxians have conquered others for millennia because no one could adapt quickly enough to stop them. Until now. As the Defiance prepared to return to Earth, Susan looked out at the stars. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting to survive on one small planet. Now that same evolutionary history made them uniquely suited for the challenges of the galaxy. The Council had officially classified humans as evolutionary anomalies. To Susan, that was the greatest compliment they could receive. In a universe of specialists, humans were the ultimate generalists. Not the strongest or fastest, but perhaps the most adaptable species the galaxy had ever encountered. 6 months after Earth joined the Galactic Council, humanity received an unusual invitation. For centuries, the Council had hosted a combat tournament. It wasn't about war. It was a display of martial skill, with strict safety rules. Now, Earth was invited to send a representative. Lieutenant Olivia Hayes volunteered immediately. At 32, she had served in Earth's Special Forces before joining the space program. She stood only 5'4" with short brown hair and a quiet demeanor that often made people underestimate her. Are you sure about this? Admiral Carter asked her during the final briefing. You'll be facing species with natural weapons. We don't have claws, poison, armor. Olivia smiled slightly. That's exactly why I should go, sir. They expect us to send our biggest, strongest fighter. I'll show them something different. The tournament was held on a neutral planet called Xanthar. The arena was enormous, with seating for thousands of spectators from dozens of worlds. Olivia felt the eyes of countless aliens on her as she entered for the opening ceremony. The other competitors towered over her. The Dravek champion stood 8 feet tall, covered in a natural exoskeleton with sharp spines along his arms. The Mescari fighter had 4 arms, each ending in razor-sharp claws. Beside them, Olivia looked small and weak, with no natural weapons at all. Your species sends its weakest to represent it? The Dravek ambassador asked Admiral Carter, who had accompanied Olivia to the event. The Admiral just smiled. The rules were simple. Victory came by forcing an opponent to yield, or by the judges stopping the match if a fighter could no longer continue safely. No weapons were allowed, only natural abilities. Olivia's first match was against a Palaran fighter, a species known for their incredible speed. As they faced each other in the arena, the crowd murmured. The Palaran was 7 feet tall with blue-tinted skin and reflexes twice as fast as a human's. The match began. The Palaran moved with blinding speed, but Olivia didn't try to match it. Instead, she stayed defensive, watching and learning. The alien landed several hits, but Olivia absorbed them, studying her opponent. The human will lose, someone in the crowd said. She is too slow. But after 3 minutes, something changed. The Palaran's attacks became more predictable. Olivia had memorized the patterns. When the alien struck again, she was ready. She used a judo throw using the Palaran's own momentum against him. The surprised alien hit the ground hard, and before he could recover, Olivia had him in a submission. The crowd fell silent in shock as the Palaran tapped out. How? The alien asked afterward. I am faster than you. Yes, Olivia agreed, but I watched and learned. Humans adapt. Each match followed a similar pattern. Olivia's opponents had natural advantages, strength, speed, armor, but she had something. They didn't. A lifetime of learning different fighting styles. She used boxing against one opponent, wrestling against another, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu against a third. The alien spectators were fascinated. Most species specialized in one combat style. Humans had developed dozens. In the semifinals, Olivia faced the Dravek champion. His exoskeleton was so tough that her strikes seemed to have no effect. He laughed as he caught her arm and threw her across the arena. "Your species is weak," he said. "No natural armor, no claws. How did you survive evolution?" Olivia got up slowly. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. "We survived because we're stubborn," she said. Then she changed tactics. Instead of trying to hurt the Dravek, she targeted his joints where the exoskeleton was flexible. She used pressure points, attacks the alien had never experienced before. The crowd watched in amazement as the smaller human methodically took down the armored giant. When the Dravek yielded, the arena erupted in excited chatter. The council scientists were recording everything, studying the human's techniques with great interest. "She fights differently in each match," Zorvex observed to Admiral Carter. "Most species have one fighting style evolved from their natural weapons. Humans seem to have improvised." "We had to," Carter replied. "We weren't the strongest or fastest on our planet. We had to learn different ways to fight different threats." The final match was against Cathar of the Mascari race, the 7-time champion. The four-armed warrior had never lost a match. His people had evolved as apex predators with natural fighting abilities humans could only dream of. The match began, and immediately Olivia was on the defensive. Cathar's forearms gave him an overwhelming advantage. He landed blow after blow. 3 minutes in, Olivia had a broken arm and 3 cracked ribs. The alien representatives called for the match to end, believing the human defeated. "The human is injured," the head judge announced. "For her safety, the match must end." "No," Olivia said, standing up straight despite the pain. "I can continue." The arena went silent as Olivia did something that shocked everyone watching. She reset her own broken arm, gritting her teeth against the pain. "Humans don't surrender when injured," she said to Cathar. "That's usually when we start fighting seriously." The match resumed. Olivia fought differently now, with an intensity that surprised even Cathar. She moved inside his reach, negating the advantage of his forearms. She ignored her injuries, pushing through the pain. When Cathar tried to retreat, Olivia pursued, relentlessly. The match lasted 20 more minutes. By the end, both fighters were exhausted, but Olivia never stopped advancing. Finally, she locked Cathar in a chokehold he couldn't escape, and the champion of 7 tournaments yielded. The arena erupted in chaos. No one had expected the human to win. Medical teams rushed in to treat Olivia's injuries, amazed that she had continued fighting with fractures that would have incapacitated fighters from most other species. "I don't understand," Cathar said to her afterward. "You were injured. How did you continue?" "Humans have a saying," Olivia replied as medics worked on her arm. "Pain is just weakness leaving the body." The tournament officials presented Olivia with the champion's medal. When interviewed by the Galactic press, she was asked what made humans different from other species. "We're not stronger or faster," she explained. "But we've spent our entire history learning to fight against stronger opponents. We've developed hundreds of fighting styles, each designed for different situations. Most importantly, we don't give up when we're hurt." As Olivia and Admiral Carter prepared to return to Earth, representatives from a dozen worlds approached them with alliance offers. Word of the human victory had spread throughout the galaxy. The message was clear. This young species might look weak, but their adaptability and resilience made them formidable allies and terrifying opponents. "I think you just changed how the galaxy sees humanity," Admiral Carter told Olivia as their ship departed. She looked down at her medical cast and smiled. "Good, because they need to understand what they see as our weakness is actually our strength." 2 years after Olivia Hayes won the Galactic tournament, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet. The Zentai Hive, a collective consciousness controlling billions of drone soldiers, began attacking the outer colonies of the Galactic Council. Unlike previous threats, the Hive didn't seek conquest. It sought to absorb all life into its collective. Major Peter Scott led the human contingent assigned to defend Europa Colony, one of the most important outposts in the sector. At 41, Scott had spent his entire military career studying unconventional warfare. Now he would need every bit of that knowledge. "The hive is unlike anything we've faced before," Scott explained to his officers in the command center. "They don't feel pain or fear. They function as one entity. Kill 1,000 drones and the hive doesn't care. They're just cells in a larger organism." Lieutenant Eric Ward pointed to the holographic display showing the approaching hive fleet. "If they don't fear death, how do we fight them?" Scott smiled grimly. "We use what makes us human: creativity, deception, and a willingness to take risks that seem illogical." The Galactic Council had sent representatives from 12 species to help defend Europa. Their ships were more advanced than human vessels, but their tactics were predictable. They fought with perfect logic and efficiency, exactly what the hive expected. "The problem," Scott told the alien commanders during their first joint briefing, "is that you're fighting as if the enemy thinks like you do. The hive calculates every move for maximum efficiency, so we need to be inefficient, deliberately unpredictable." The alien commanders looked confused. The Andarian admiral, a tall being with crystalline features, spoke first. "Your suggestion is to be deliberately suboptimal in our approach? That seems counterproductive." "Exactly," Scott agreed. "The hive anticipates optimal responses. We need to do what they consider impossible, make choices that appear self-defeating." The alien commanders reluctantly agreed to let Scott implement his strategy. The human plan began with a series of small defeats, withdrawals from positions that could have been defended, abandonment of resources that could have been saved. "We're showing weakness," Scott explained to his worried officers, "making the hive think we're breaking." For 2 weeks, the human and alien forces retreated across Europa Colony. They gave up ground that cost the lives of soldiers to defend. The alien commanders grew increasingly concerned. "Your strategy is failing," the Andarian admiral told Scott. "We are losing territory at an unacceptable rate." "We're not losing," Scott replied calmly. "We're positioning." The turning point came when the hive committed their reserves to finish off what they perceived as a broken enemy. Their main force pushed through a narrow valley between 2 mountain ranges. "Now," Scott ordered over the command channel. The mountains on both sides of the valley exploded. His forces had spent weeks planting nuclear mines throughout the region while appearing to retreat in disorder. The massive avalanches trapped half the hive army in the valley. Before they could reorganize, Scott launched his real attack. Not against the trapped forces, but against the hive's command ships in orbit. "They expected us to finish off the trapped drones," Scott explained to his officers. "That's the logical move. Instead, we're ignoring that advantage to strike at something they thought was safe." The human ships, hidden on the far side of Europa's moon, surged toward the hive command vessels. The attack caught the hive completely by surprise. 7 of their 12 command ships were destroyed before they could respond. In the valley below, the trapped hive drones suddenly became disorganized. Without the complete connection to the hive mind, they reverted to basic programming. "The hive thinks as one entity," Scott told his forces as they pressed the attack. "Cut off enough of that consciousness, and the rest becomes vulnerable." The battle lasted 3 more days. By the end, the hive had been driven from the Europa system entirely. It was their first major defeat since they had begun their expansion a century earlier. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss this unexpected victory. Representatives from dozens of worlds wanted to understand how humans had succeeded where other, more advanced species had failed. "The hive thinks as one entity focused on efficiency," Major Scott explained to the Council. "They can't understand why we would willingly suffer losses to gain a strategic advantage." Zorvex, the Council's chief scientist, studied the battle records with fascination. "Most species fight based on instinct or learned patterns," the scientist observed. "Humans seem to fight based on psychology. You understood how the hive thought and deliberately countered it." "We used psychological warfare against an enemy that supposedly had no psychology," Scott agreed. "The hive expected rational opponents, making optimal decisions. We made suboptimal decisions that served a larger strategy they couldn't predict. The Andarian diplomat approached Scott after the council session. They fight like they've spent their entire history preparing for this moment, she observed to her colleagues, as if every human conflict for thousands of years was just practice for interstellar war. Scott overheard her comment and smiled slightly. In a way, that's true, he told her. Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. We've developed countless strategies, counter-strategies, and counter-counter-strategies. We understand deception, misdirection, and sacrifice in ways the Hive never could. Word of the victory at Europa spread quickly throughout the galaxy. The Hive, which had seemed unstoppable, suddenly faced resistance on multiple fronts. Other species began adopting human tactics, deliberately unpredictable movements, apparent retreats that were actually traps, and sacrificing short-term advantages for long-term gains. As Major Scott prepared to return to Earth for debriefing, he received a message from Admiral Carter. The Council has requested that we establish a human military academy to train officers from other species. The message read, "Your victory has convinced them that the human approach to warfare is worth studying." Scott looked out the viewport of his ship at the stars. Humanity had spent millennia developing the art of war against itself. Now those same skills had saved countless lives across the galaxy. The irony, he said to himself, is that our greatest weakness turned out to be our greatest strength. As his ship jumped to faster than light speed, the Zentai Hive was already adapting, trying to understand this species that had defied their predictions. But they were learning what the Vraxians had discovered years before. Humans were masters of adaptation themselves. By the time the Hive thought they understood human tactics, those tactics would have already changed. 10 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the Vraxian Dominion. In that decade, Earth had gone from an unknown backwater to one of the most influential members of the Galactic Council. Human military advisors were now stationed throughout the galaxy. The fighting techniques of Lieutenant Hayes were taught in combat schools on 100 worlds. Major Scott's tactical innovations had been adopted by the Council's Joint Defense Forces. Professor Jack Mitchell stood before the full Galactic Council in their grand chamber. At 65, Mitchell was one of Earth's leading anthropologists. He had spent his career studying how humans had evolved and developed. Now he had been asked to explain to the gathered representatives of 87 spacefaring civilizations exactly why humans were different. Distinguished members of the Council, Mitchell began, his voice calm and measured. I've been asked to address the question that has fascinated this body for the past decade. What makes humans unique as a combatant species? The chamber was packed. Even species that rarely attended council sessions had sent representatives. Mitchell could see the Vraxians in their section, watching him intently. The Zentai Hive had even sent a drone to observe. What makes humans unique isn't our technology or our strength, Mitchell explained. It's our evolutionary history as both predator and prey, our ability to function despite injury, our capacity to improvise, and most importantly, our social cohesion under threat. Mitchell activated the holographic display. Images from Earth's history appeared. Ancient hunters working together to bring down animals many times their size, medieval armies clashing on battlefields, modern soldiers operating as coordinated teams. Humans fought among themselves constantly, throughout history, Mitchell continued. Yet when threatened by outsiders, we unite with terrifying efficiency. We view surrender as worse than death in many cases, most disturbing to many species. Humans seem to actually improve their performance under extreme duress. The council chambers fell silent when Mitchell showed footage from Earth's history. Humans continuing to fight despite horrific injuries, soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to save comrades, and ordinary citizens performing extraordinary feats during crises. This Marine, Mitchell said, pointing to one image, continued fighting for 3 hours after losing his arm to save his unit. This civilian lifted a vehicle weighing 2 tons to save a trapped child. This pilot landed a damaged aircraft that engineers later determined was impossible to fly in its condition. Gazorvex, now the head of the council's science division, stood to ask a question. We have studied human physiology extensively. The adrenaline response you possess is remarkable, but it doesn't fully explain these capabilities. There seems to be a psychological component we cannot quantify. Mitchell nodded. You're right. Humans have something beyond our physical adaptations. We have will. When faced with impossible situations, humans often refuse to accept defeat. We continue fighting long after logical analysis would suggest surrender. The representative from the Mescari Confederation spoke next. Yet humans are not mindless berserkers. Your Commander West used clever tactics against the Vraxians. Your Major Scott employed complex psychological strategies against the Hive. How do you explain this? Duality? That's the true paradox of humanity, Mitchell replied. We can be both rational and irrational simultaneously. We can make cold, calculated decisions in one moment, then perform seemingly suicidal acts of courage in the next. Our best military leaders understand both the science of warfare and the art of inspiration. Mitchell changed the display to show human brain scans. Our brains developed layers over millions of years. We have primitive structures that control fight-or-flight responses and advanced regions capable of complex planning. Unlike many species, these systems work together rather than replacing each other. The Vraxian ambassador, whose species had started the first conflict with humanity, stood to address Mitchell. When we first encountered your kind, we believed you were primitive and weak. We now understand that we fundamentally misunderstood what makes a species dangerous. Mitchell looked directly at the Vraxian. And what did you learn? We learned, the ambassador said, that technological superiority is not the same as evolutionary advantage. We evolved in environments with few threats. Our bodies are stronger, our technology more advanced, but we lack the adaptability that hardship forced upon your species. Mitchell thanked the ambassador for the insight and continued his presentation. The galaxy fears us not because we are inherently violent, but because we evolved in an environment where giving up meant extinction. Our greatest strength isn't that we're fearless, it's that we act despite our fear. He showed the final set of images. Human first responders rushing into burning buildings, astronauts volunteering for dangerous missions, soldiers standing ground against overwhelming odds. We aren't the strongest species, or the fastest, or the most technologically advanced, Mitchell concluded. But we are, without question, the most determined to survive. We fight hardest when victory seems impossible. We are at our best when the situation is at its worst. As the council session ended, representatives from dozens of worlds approached Mitchell with questions. Some seemed fearful, others fascinated. The Andarian diplomat summed up what many were thinking. We invited humanity to join the galactic community expecting to be your teachers, she told Mitchell. Instead, you have become ours. The lessons of human resilience have strengthened all our worlds. Later, as Mitchell prepared to return to Earth, the Vraxian ambassador approached him privately. We attacked you because we thought you were weak, the ambassador admitted. Now the galaxy avoids war with Earth not because we think you're strong, but because we know you're impossible to defeat. You don't win by being better at war. You win because you simply refuse to lose, no matter the cost. Mitchell smiled slightly. There's an old saying on Earth, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. The ambassador tilted his head, confused by the expression. It means, Mitchell explained, that determination often matters more than power. Humanity survived on Earth despite being physically weaker than many predators because we simply refused to be extinguished. As his ship left the council world, Mitchell looked back at the glittering lights of the galactic capital. In just 10 years, humanity had changed how countless species viewed warfare, survival, and adaptation. Earth was no longer just one small planet in a vast cosmos. It was the home of a species that had turned its evolutionary scars into galactic strengths. The true horror of humanity as a combatant species wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their unyielding resilience in the face of it. And that, more than any weapon or technology, was why humanity had become the galaxy's most terrifying combatant species.